I remember I did a book with 50 Cent called The 50th Law. And 50, I met him because he's a big fan of the 48 Laws of Power, right? It's like his Bible. And I remember for that book, I went to a lot of meetings with him. I was kind of hanging out with him. And he would always tell me, Robert, watch me in a meeting. I'll say very little, but everybody will have their eyes on me, right? Because when you talk, then they kind of know who you are and they start to almost disregard you. But when you're silent, particularly someone like him, why is 50 not reacting to what I'm talking about? Why isn't he saying he loves my ideas? What's he thinking? What's going on in his head? When you make other people think about what's going on in your head, you're the one in control of the situation. Whereas if they know everything that you're thinking, everything that you're doing, then they have power. They have power over you. So I would see him in a meeting and he would sit there all quiet and everybody else would be freaking out. So to sum it up, it's an aura of power. You know, business is very matter of fact, but it's also pure psychology, right? You've got to understand the psychology behind power. And I don't know what you're thinking right now, Mark. It's appearances, right? You could be wearing a mask. You're smiling right now, but you're smiling. You might not really be smiling. You might be kind of uncomfortable. You may not like me or something like that. I don't know. You're wearing a mask. So power is about appearances. And there's weakness, things that show weakness. And in my book, The Laws of Human Nature, I talk about the kind of the weak body language, the weak signs that people can kind of feed off of you. They smell it. Then there are powerful things. And you want to create this aura of power, even though inside you might not feel so powerful or feel so comfortable or secure. But outwardly, you want to show this appearance that makes people think, wow, this guy, he's authority. I respect him. Talking less creates an aura of power. It makes you look larger than you actually are. It makes you make people think he's mysterious. He or she's mysterious. When you talk a lot, I don't know if you've noticed this, but people who talk a lot, there's something insecure about them. If you can't control your own mouth, if you can't control that, then what can you control? You can't control your emotions. You can't control your behavior. It signals weakness and insecurity. Whereas talking less, you're not going to say something stupid. And then when you do speak, it's going to carry a lot of weight. So it seems like an unimportant law. Oh, always talk less than speak less than necessary. But it's actually extremely important to understand the psychology of what gives the appearance, the aura of power, and what doesn't.
So are you basically recommending people that almost like transparency and authenticity is overrated? You should say less, be disciplined in nature, and every word that comes out of your mouth needs to be strategic in nature.
I mean, down to the baseline of every human being, we're all actors. Some are good actors, some act more, some are bad actors. But I always tell people, if you look at children, 3 or 4 years old, or you remember your own childhood, you were constantly pretending, you were constantly acting to your parents. You would act like an angel to get something that you wanted. You'd act all sweet and innocent because you wanted some candy, you wanted some game. Being an actor is part of human nature. It's deeply, deeply ingrained in all of us because we're a social animal. If you went around just speaking everything that you thought, you would offend everyone around you, right? If you told somebody that their clothes are ugly, that they look fat, that their ideas are stupid, they're going to hate you. You're not going to get very far in life. So you learn at an early age to control what you say, to control who you are, to control what you do. Think about your life, Mark. When you are interacting with Michael Jordan, you have a certain way of behaving around him, right? You're probably a little bit intimidated, probably don't speak as much, probably don't. But when you're around one of your other employees who just joined, you're completely different. You're acting. You're not the same person in front of Michael Jordan as you are in front of your 21-year-old new employee. That is acting. That's how we all are. We're different in front of our father than we are with our friends, right? So get over this notion that we can all just hang out and just be who we are. You're never being who you are. You're always acting to some degree.
You're really touching on the formlessness law, which is really that malleability and adaptability based on a per situation perspective. Can somebody win in business and life if they're not malleable to the situation?
Well, let me explain to you the idea a little bit behind formlessness first, okay? So, a lot of that comes from Sun Tzu, very obviously. It's an Asian idea about being kind of water and being fluid in life. But it's also an idea that for me came very much from Machiavelli. And I've noticed this with a lot of business leaders. I noticed it when I was on the board of directors of American Apparel and with the CEO, Dov Charney. And what Machiavelli talks about is people rise to power. They become a CEO, they become a leader, they become a president or whatever, based on certain qualities that they have, a strength. It could be aggression. It could be being a people pleaser, being just very empathetic. It could be having a populist touch. It could be good with words, an orator. That's their strength. They use that and they get a lot of power because they're good at it. They don't have to think about it. It's almost natural to them. They get to a position of power, and now the times are changing because things are always changing, particularly nowadays, where things change month by month, right? Trends are changing. Young people are coming up. Tastes are changing. The world is changing. Your rivals are changing. The business world is changing. And you're still holding on to that one quality that brought you to the top. You're still thinking that my aggression or that my being popular and pleasing everybody or my speaking well, and you keep holding on to that, and the world has passed you by and you're weak. And Machiavelli said, if I could create the monster, the Frankenstein of a leader in business or politics, whatever, it would be somebody who could change with the times, who they rose to power based on a strength. They see that it's not quite the right quality and they adapt and they move with the times. He compared it to a river, right? And you're kind of moving like the water, you're flowing with this river, and that's power. But being rigid and having a form and having a strategy that you always rely on and having a personality that you always exude to the world and perform as is weak because you can't adapt. I mean, think of your business in the last 3 years. Can you begin to imagine all the incredible shifts that have occurred in just that time?
My
I mean,
business has completely changed in 3 years. I
is
would
it?
say every single year it's a new business.
Yeah,
I think a key thing to understand and know there too is like you have to, I wouldn't say detach feelings, but you have to detach your ego and just have a completely open mind, or else you're going to lose now more so than ever with what's going on with the world.
right.
Yeah. And I would say experimentation is another
Yeah,
big
you
one.
bring up a good point. Ego is definitely a part of that. You're holding on to the past because that's what brought you success. That's who you think you are. To change yourself, to become fluid, to be something different, means you have to let go of the past. You have to let go of your ego. So that's a very important quality.
Do you think leaders can be too kind of fluid in formlessness, or will they lose their identity? What needs to stay? Is it just the vision and then just be malleable and all the other tactics tied to it?
Well, it's a delicate game. As I tried to say in the beginning, don't think of power as these are these set laws that I have to follow. It's got to be this way. It's got to be A or B or C. Open your mind up. Don't be so rigid about it. So sometimes you have to be consistent, right? That's your brand. If you're certainly changing your brand every 6 months, people don't know who you are, don't know what it's about. You're going to lose your customers, your clients, right? But if you're too stuck, if you're too always the same, people are going to be bored with you. So the game in 2025 and moving forward has a lot to do with attention. People have written about this, but attention is money. Attention is something that you can monetize, right? Being able to get the attention in a world where you're competing with billions of other people out there, right? Okay. And so in order to gain people's attention, people get very bored, right? They get very bored very quickly if you're always the same, if you always have one note.
Yeah, I think in business and in life, complacency is the most dangerous drug. And in order to keep momentum, I think consistency is one thing, but you have to stay interesting.
Yeah.
And an example with me is just I've always been known as like a business and an operator. And now I could tell people in my network are kind of shaken up. They're now like, are you a content creator? Are you a podcaster? And I think that was a necessary
Yeah.
shakeup because it was getting kind of old with what I was doing. I needed
Yeah.
something new and fresh.
Yeah. I mean, I've always believed this. It's been kind of an instinct of mine. And so I wrote the 48 Laws of Power, and it was it was successful. It's gone much more popular since the first couple of years, but it was quite successful. And I could have easily made my second book, The 48 Laws of Power Part 2. People wanted me to do that. They wanted me to go further into it. But I never, ever, 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 ever want to be predictable. I don't want anybody to ever think what my next book will be. So I go to seduction, which is quite a change from power. And then I go to war, which is a little bit similar to power, but it's also different. Then I go to book with 50 Cent. Then I go to mastery, which has nothing to do with the other books, which is all about your brain, how to master your field. Then I do the human nature. And now I'm doing a book on the sublime. So I want to stay one step ahead of people. I never want them to think, oh, I know what Robert's about. I know what his next book's going to be. I know what his laws are. He's very predictable. I'm never going to go in the direction that people expect me to go in.
I think like a halo that goes over the whole entire book and directly correlates to all of the laws, especially the guard your reputation at all costs, is the ability to reinvent yourself. You keep
Yeah.
iterating in and around that. What are the key kind of strategies and initiatives should you do for the marketplace to see you differently?
So to give you an example, I was on the board of directors of American Apparel, right? And American Apparel was incredibly successful, right? Up until the turning point was the year 2007, when we went public and we had to assume massive amounts of debt. And then there was the crash in '08. And suddenly our debt was crushing, right? And we never recovered from it. But the point I'm getting at is Dove created a brand that was all based on the early 80s and the mid 80s, kind of sexy, tight clothes, kind of the workout, the Jane Fonda mentality. He was a child of the 80s. He was sort of stuck in that era. And it worked. It was brilliant. People loved it. But I could already sense in the year 2009, this was a company that was mostly selling to young girls, to young women. Their tastes were changing. That kind of sexy look and whole approach, it was starting to become passé. And I was telling Dove, you've got to shift it a little bit. You've got to shift with the times. Things are changing right now. People aren't so much looking into the early 80s. They're thinking it differently. Let's come up with a different line of clothing, or let's reflect that more. Now, I'm not saying I knew exactly the answer, but my point to him was, I think you're in the danger of becoming passé. The worst thing that can happen to anybody in business, that suddenly the public perceives you as being 2 or 3 or 5 years behind the times. That's deadly. It's okay to appear 50 years behind the times. That's nostalgic. That's interesting. But 4 or 5 years behind the time, that's deadly. That's the kind of strategic thinking I'm talking about. All right? Where you've got a brand, you're known for a certain thing, and times are changing. Maybe you have to shift that, knowing how times are going. I mean, we could talk about people like Elon Musk, who's got a very powerful image, consistent brand for who he is, right? But then sometimes it can get predictable. It can get like, he's always in your face. He's always, he takes boldness to the nth degree. So maybe somebody like that, if he shifted a little bit, and sometimes I've seen signs of that potentiality, and he showed a little slightly different side to him, I think it would help him a lot, because right now he seems powerful, but he's also getting a little bit predictable. And maybe his public image, I think, is going to suffer from that.
Yeah, I feel like it's just as simple as just showing like his softer side and his family. And I completely agree. He's very stiff and hard and against what's going on with the current regime. It would take something very small to, I think, completely shift the
Yeah.
complete public perception.
Yeah.
Going deeper into that, is there a world where you can actually chase too much attention? Is it about just getting as much attention as possible?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep name dropping here, so please excuse me, but I was approached by a well-known female rapper, Saweetie, okay? And
That's a good name drop. I like that.
okay, and she asked me, Robert, you have some of the laws that are about mystery, appearing mysterious, creating an aura of mystery, using absence to create honor and respect. How do you do that in the era of social media, where it's all about grabbing as much attention as possible? How can you withdraw? How can you be mysterious? And I said, well, look, people are very bored right now. They're like children who've been continually stimulated with all kinds of new and exciting new toys, right? And you're vying for their attention, okay? If you're always the same, if you're always doing the same, if you're always appearing the same, they're going to get bored with you and they're going to look for something else. So you have to be mysterious. You have to withdraw. If you withdraw and you're not always vying for their attention, you disappear for a month. You don't post anything, or you post something that's maybe a little bit enigmatic where they're not quite sure what you mean. Suddenly they're going to pay attention to you. I talk about this about certain musicians, like Michael Jackson was very good about that. Part of it was his personality, but he would withdraw. People don't understand Michael Jackson was a real kind of power person. He really is interested in the game of power. In fact, I've said this before in other podcasts, he had the 48 Laws of Power. And when he died, they auctioned his copy of the book. And it had all of these notes in it. He'd annotated it completely with his own notes. So he was very interested. But before the book came out, he understood the game of power. And he understood sometimes you have to withdraw. Sometimes you have to be one of those movie stars like Greta Garbo who disappears for 6 months, a year, or 2 years. People start thinking, what's he up to next? When's his next album going to be out? What's it going to be about? Even Beyonce plays the game like that. So the people, these are artists, so it's a little easier. But the game is to sometimes withdraw from that attention cycle. We are always having to be something for other people. Let's take a step back and let them start wondering what happened to you. Disappear for a while. You have to know the game of absence and presence. Sometimes you have to be absent and sometimes you have to be present. Napoleon Bonaparte said, if I show up at the theater every evening as a spectator, the audience sees me, they start taking me for granted. But if I show up a month later, they go, oh, there's Napoleon, wow. Then I show up the next week, oh, he's coming off. And then I show up in 6 months. They don't know when I'm going to show up next. So they're always having to think about him. So that's sort of the game a little bit, knowing how to, this dynamic between absence and presence.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, with increasing the honor through the absence. Putting aside kind of being strategic and when you come and go, at general face value, do you think it's better to be attacked and slandered or ignored completely?
Better to be attacked and slandered.
Better to be attacked and slandered.
Definitely.
So you're under the notion of any press is good press in that sense.
Definitely. Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, look, the 48 Laws of Power, when it came out, was very controversial because honestly, it's got an edge to it, a moral edge. There are laws in it that are a little bit frightening to some people, and that controversy, that edge, people hating it is what created an aura of it. So controversy, now scandal is something else because that could play against you, particularly if it's a scandal for a certain thing, for what, certain subjects, certain scandalous acts. But controversy is incredibly powerful, right? Because it makes people think about you. So sometimes I get so annoyed because everything now is so politically correct. We've all got to appear to be these saints. We always have to have this kind of virtue signaling, right? But it's not real. It's not true. It's not who we are because we all have a dark side. I talked in several podcasts about Kobe Bryant, who we were talking about earlier. Kobe had a dark side, and you could see it in his game, and it's what attracted to it. It's what made him a great player, okay? You have a dark side, I have a dark side. So we're all attracted to people who show a little bit of it, who show a little bit of that dark side, that little bit of controversy, who are not so predictable, who are not so sweet and angelic. So controversy is extremely powerful in the power game.
And as far as that goes, I feel like it's similar in business where as long as it's not fatal, it actually builds your lore. Like when Kobe went through the whole entire case in Colorado a
Yeah,
long
that
time ago, whether guilty or not guilty, that just built up this new storyline that kept him in the media. And then it was a bigger and greater arc when he obviously recovered from it, became a great family man, and now he was
yeah,
looked at
yeah,
under that light. So you go really, really deep into how important reputation is. Under the notion we're talking about attention, good attention, bad attention. If your reputation gets quote unquote ruined, can that be something that could be built back?
of course. I've had dealings with that with people who've come to me about that very thing. So there are times when you need to apologize, and the apology has to be sincere, and it has to be not the usual thing where I don't know what came over me. That's not who I am. That just happened once. No, you acknowledge that you made a mistake, right? That you did something wrong, and you show genuine contrition. And then, a lot of people who were canceled 6 years ago, that's when they were contacting me, or 8 years ago. And I said, show that you're contrition, understand why people reacted against you, give it a little bit of time, and then come back with more or less the same image, but understanding that there are kind of guardrails here. You know, I thought, for instance, watching Jimmy Kimmel last night and his monologue, that's not quite the same thing because it was just like 4 days or so that he was canceled, and it was a scandal, but it wasn't like a huge scandal. But I thought how he handled it was really, really good. He was apologetic. He understood why it was taken the wrong way, but he wasn't this craven coward who was just saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry for everything I did. I'm not going to behave like that anymore." Because that doesn't seem authentic. That doesn't seem genuine.
And he positions himself with strength that he
Yeah.
apologized, but at the same time, this is who I am. I'm not going to change for the
But he
reason.
also acknowledged the wife of Charlie Kirk, and he said that she did it very gracefully. He said, it's terrible that this young man was murdered. And his wife, his own wife, forgave the assassin. Incredible thing. He acknowledged that. And yet at the same time, he then was being more or less himself. He wasn't going to change who he was. That was a very powerful way of handling that kind of scandal.
In relation to reputation, in 2025, do you think reputation is more important than capital?
Reputation is capital. So to give you an example, I look at Elon Musk, for instance, okay? And I look at the early years of Tesla. Now, anybody who studies the manufacture of automobile business knows that to start a new automobile company is extremely precarious. The amount of capital that you need to start up with the factories, with the overhead, with the materials, from getting parts from all over the world is enormous. It's why nobody starts from scratch an automobile company, which he did, okay? Now, his cars were well built, they were interesting, but what he did was his reputation, his boldness. He was on Twitter at the time saying all of these different things. He was always in the news with very bold pronouncements. People loved him. This is before his more recent iteration. They were excited about him. His reputation meant people would now, when he went public, people were investing in it based on his reputation, not based on Tesla, not based on the actual cars that he was producing, not based on knowledge of the business, of the finance of Tesla, which was actually in the hole, which was actually deeply in debt, based on his reputation as a maverick, as somebody inventive, as somebody who was interesting and innovative, a true pioneer spirit. Money poured in, investment money poured in to the publicly traded company, which then turned into capital that he could now use to build this company and build the cars. His reputation in that case was capital.
I think in his case, too, it was reputation combined with attention, his ability to garner
Attention?
the attention in
Oh, yeah.
conjunction with his reputation is what did it for him.
Guys, quick 60-second break. I am so excited to announce our first partnership. It is the perfect fit for me and what I believe in, and more importantly, you, the audience. I have personally spent tens of millions of dollars on meta ads. At one point, it made up 95% of my entire marketing budget. That kind of platform dependency is a real risk. One algorithm shift and your whole entire business can stall. This is why I partnered with Universal Ads, the CTV ad platform powered by the biggest names in TV, built for any size business. In under 5 minutes, you can advertise across the best shows on NBC, Paramount, Roku, and more. You can reach up to 90% of the households in the US at social media CPMs. And the platform gives you full control. You can target by viewership, behavior, income, geography, custom audiences, and more. Just like you guys are used to seeing on social. I'm giving out $500 in ad credits with my referral code to the first 50 people who fill out the form below. First come, first serve, it's gonna go fast. And if you're spending over $300K a month on paid, I have something special for you. Everything's in the description below. Go diversify now and appreciate the support.
What is the right way to package wins so the people above you feel ownership instead of feeling threatened?
You mean never outshine the master?
Yes, sir.
So it says never outshine the master. Maybe it should be usually don't outshine the master, but that wouldn't have sounded so good. So you have to understand that the person above you has an ego and has probably a bigger ego than you do, obviously, because they're powerful. But with an ego comes insecurities, okay? So you must be aware that the person above you has insecurities and probably has more than you do because they're constantly worried, do people still like me? Am I still doing as well? Am I as popular as I was a year ago? Am I getting as much attention as I deserve? Am I doing a good job? He or she is very insecure. They're thinking about these things all the time. So what happens is if you try too eagerly to impress them and you do such a good job on some project or something, and then all the attention accrues to you for doing that, then you're going to trigger their insecurities. Wow, this person's getting the attention and not me. Maybe they're after my job. Maybe they're more popular than I am. They're not going to consciously think this because they don't want to admit that they're insecure. But unconsciously, they're worried about you. They're thinking things that maybe you're a threat, right? And slowly they're going to build up kind of resentment towards you. And what will happen is you'll probably be fired or you'll be demoted. So if you work hard on a project for somebody else from somebody higher up in your group and you do a great job, you need to tone it down a little bit. Don't take so much credit. Let them bask a little bit in the glory. Let them have the attention. Yes, they're the genius behind the project. I was just executing their desires. That makes them suddenly go, wow, this person, you understand that they did a great job, but they're being a little bit humble. They're giving you the attention, which you deserve anyway because you think you do, okay? But if you're too weak about it, if you're too humble, if you're going, you don't take credit at all, you weren't involved in it at all, that makes you look weak, right? So you have to be kind of nuanced. You have to do a good job. You have to try really hard. You have to do the best that you can, but you got to let the person above you take some of the credit, take some of the glory. Otherwise, they're going to be wondering about you. They're going to be thinking that you think that you're better than them, and you're going to trigger their insecurities. This is the most important law and power that I want you to engrave in your brain right now as you listen to me. And it's the following. Everybody has insecurities and has an ego. And the worst thing you can do for your boss, for your colleagues, for the people underneath you, is to violate their ego, to make them feel insecure. You will pay a price for it. They will resent you. They will work against you. They will betray you in the end. So never lose sight that everybody around you has an ego and has insecurities.
If you're thinking about going upstream, you're an employee with your boss. In short, kind of do good, do your work, selectively compliment them. But then on the flip side, the boss, you recommend have everybody do the work for you, but then take credit.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to expand on that. What's your thoughts with that?
So the law came from, I worked in Hollywood unfortunately, for like 10 years. It kind of inspired the 48 Laws. I say unfortunately because I hated Hollywood. But I would work for a film director who would be doing a screenplay, and I would write large portions of the dialogue and I would contribute to it. Nobody ever knew that. It was always his name on it, right? He got all the fame, all the glory, all the attention. And at the time, kind of bothered me. I was kind of resentful. And then when I wrote the 48 Laws of Power, I had this idea that, Robert, you did the wrong thing. You were stupid. The game of power should have been, that's how things are, right? When you look at a politician who gives a great speech and everybody's going, wow, Barack Obama, that was an amazing speech.
Someone wrote that speech.
Somebody wrote it. He never wrote it. And you never know that name who wrote it. You might, but no one ever gets that attention. When you see some journalist giving some really interesting monologue on television, somebody else wrote that, did all the research and gave them all the notes for that. Comedians. Bill Maher doesn't write his material. He's got a team of people writing all the jokes, right? You never see them. You never know them. Maybe the credits roll by really quickly, right? So that's how powerful people operate, okay? And I should have just accepted it. I should have been more humble. I should have said, that's how the jungle is. There are people who take the credit for it. And if I didn't resent it, I wouldn't have lost energy. If you get too worked up about things, if everything is so dramatic, if you're emotional, if you're reacting against everything, it drains you of energy. It clouds your mind. You're not a good strategist. You're not a good warrior in life. You're not a good power player because your brain is just sinking into this mud of reactions and emotions. So I should have just been more zen about it. This is how the game is. Eventually, if I keep writing this good dialogue and stuff, he's going to let me take credit, or I will get credit for it eventually. If I'm humble, if I'm serious, if I learn the game, if I play it right. If you play the game of power right, you read the book, you understand it, you will be rewarded at the end of the game, right? You will be rewarded. So I wrote that chapter because people in power use that and know about it, but also for you, the person starting out or who's younger, to understand that that's what's going to be happening to you. People are going to be taking your work and taking credit for it, but just accept that.
How much of avoiding outshining the master is really just about knowing who you're dealing with? It seems like it's very contextual to who the actual master or boss is.
Yes, it is, and it's nuanced. And some people, if you work really hard, you do a great job, and you get attention for it, they won't mind. Your boss will be fine. They'll be happy for you. There'll be no resentment. There'll be no pettiness. There'll be no envy. Great if you have a boss like that. But do you want me to tell you the percentage of bosses who will be like that? It's probably about 5%, okay? I'm just throwing that number up. That's what I think, right? But if that's who your boss is, fantastic. Wunderbar, love it, go for it. But the chances are that they're probably not. So law number one is understand that probably they're insecure, probably you're going to trigger their egos, and be a little bit careful. But understand as well, what are their insecurities? What is going to trigger that? So to give you an example from my own life, because I violated this law once, I worked for an awful, awful television show back in the 90s, whose name I won't even mention. I was a researcher for it, okay? And I was the best researcher on this crap show. And best researcher meant that the stories I found were the ones that were most used. I had a higher percentage, right? Kind of went to my head. Wow, I'm hot shit, you know? I'm by far the best researcher on this crew. And I had a boss, a woman, and she ended up thinking I had an attitude. Like, Robert just thinks he's so great, okay? And one day we had a meeting, and I hated these meetings because they were such bullshit. Nothing is accomplished, just people talking. It's just political crap. That's how I felt. So I was kind of like doodling in my notebook. I wasn't listening. She goes, Robert, is something wrong here? Do you think you're better than everybody else? Ended up, she started really harassing me after that. Not sexually or anything. She started harassing me, my job, right? And eventually I just quit because I couldn't handle it anymore. I was sick of it. I hated the job. I hated her. And I hated all the politicking that was involved. Shouldn't life be about doing the best job, getting the best stories? Isn't that what matters? No, that's not what matters in business or politics. What matters is pleasing people, stroking their egos. I triggered her insecurity, which was She didn't feel like she was in authority. She didn't feel like I respected her. That was her weakness. If I understood that, maybe I would have played it differently, but I wouldn't have played it differently because I wanted to quit that job anyway.
That's discovering that thumbscrew, what the weaknesses and the motives and the things that make people tick and act differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to know that initially. I think for Outshine the Master, it's very upstream. It's bosses to investors, employees to bosses. A really, really interesting. Let's call it the 49th law of power here, actually.
There is no 49.
This is a good one. I think you're going to agree with it. It's new, and I've heard it. My buddy Simon Molnar, he's actually next on the podcast. He was a part of Afterpay. His brother was the founder.
Afterpay?
Afterpay.
Afterpay. Oh, sorry.
And so if you buy something for $100 online, I'll say spend 25 in installments. And I go, he was a billionaire in his late 20s. And I asked him, what was his superpower? What was his moat? And he said he had the ability, we're talking downstream now, that as the boss, even if it was his ideas,